Yay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to an episode of Sensitive and Empowered with Matt and Alyssa. We haven't been with you for a while. We took the summer off just to live life and be present and just focus on ourselves and family and friends and all the things. And so it's so fun to be back with you now at the end of September, although when this comes out, it'll, probably be October, but it's fall now. Been through a lot. And this week we are diving in with a really juicy topic that I know a lot of you are going to resonate with. I know it's something that comes up for so many people in the highly sensitive empath community. So today, Matt and I are going to be talking about self-abandonment,
Mm.
which is, kind of another way of saying people pleasing, but I just really resonate more with the terminology of like self-abandoning because at the core, that's what it really is. So
Yeah.
as always, Matt and I are going to share our personal journeys, what this has looked like for us, and yeah, just find some or pull out some insights that you can apply to your life so that you can make some changes as well. So happy to be here with you, Matt.
Ditto.
Um,
Ditto.
as always, we can just dive right in because that's how we do things.
Yeah.
So first, I just wanted to ask you, and we can both kind of riff on this, is what has your personal self-abandonment journey looked like? And then what really caused you to go from someone who is available all of the time, saying yes, whatever that looked like for you, to then going to somebody who is more mindful about who gets access to you.
Hmm. Yeah, this is almost like two fairly big questions, I think. I'll tell a bit of a story because I have a story that I think is going to set up my talking about this further. Um, so over the summer, I had a bit of a summer fling, and without going into too much detail, I don't like to talk too much about romantic relationships in just in on these things. I like to keep that fairly private, but um, speaking from my side of things, I noticed a bit of old patterning, codependent patterning coming back up in this relationship, and I hadn't been in a relationship for a bit, and I noticed some self-abandoning happening. And being very preoccupied, what's going on in their world? Are they safe? It was some of that old trauma responding coming back. So I decided to go on and embark on another journey of doing some therapy, but this time I wanted to start and try something I've never done before, which was EMDR. And I know you've had experience with EMDR. You've told me that you've had some success with it. Um, and I had been recommended it so many times, but I decided to go down the somatic therapy route for the last year and a half to heal from some of my burnout. And that was great because I needed that experience in order to do some of the healing work that's required in EMDR, which is you have to be embodied. You got to be in your body and be present with the emotions that are coming up. Um, so, anyways, and then when I reached out to you and you're like, hey, this is the topic I want to do, I was like, oh my God, this is totally what I'm processing in EMDR. So, how fitting, right? But to answer the question directly, like what has been my self-abandonment journey? It's started when I was very young. Growing up with a mother who experienced a lot of emotional unavailability and neglect in her childhood. This really brought it infiltrated into her parenting with me and kind of passed that down. And I have a feeling that my grandmother and grandfather experienced that same emotional unavailability and neglect. So it's kind of intergenerational. It's been passed down. So I felt an energy from my mother growing up when I was a young, little empathic boy, highly sensitive. And it was this energy of like, you look after me and I'll look after you. But the you look after me came first before the I'll look after you. So I got the messaging that I had to take care of her and look after her. And then my needs for safety and love and validation and approval and all these things would come back. So I learned from a very young age that my needs are secondary. So, fast forward, I go into counseling, I start doing this work, and there has been a massive imbalance throughout my life around giving and receiving. Most of my life have been giving 90%, receiving 10%. And I had a lot of stuff around like worthiness and am I lovable enough? And am I, when I would receive, I would feel guilty as if I owed them something after. So I always became very hyper independent and didn't need anything. Um, which is interesting because the codependency kind of told me like you have to abandon yourself to make sure other people don't abandon you. And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, well, the whole reason why I'm scared of being abandoned is because I'm abandoning myself. That's what EMDR is showing me. So if I can stop abandoning myself, I won't be so preoccupied with if somebody's going to abandon me because I'm there for myself. So I'm kind of like taking back myself. Like I always talk in my podcasts about big S, which is big self, and like little O, or big O, other, little S, which is what I grew up with. I had a very, very high external focal point on other, and a little S, a little sense of self. So I'm learning how to like reclaim my sense of self and like be more in my power around self and not so focused on other. Um, and then what caused me to go from being available to everyone all the time to being mindful of who gets access to me is burnout.
Mhm.
That's what this burnout has shown me. It's shown me that I can't keep doing this. I can't keep playing out this patterning. And I think I was really showing the shadow side of why I do what I do. I think most human beings, we go into things, a lot of times they can be altruistic, but sometimes there's shadows to the reasons why we show up to do things, whether that's like manipulating to get our needs met. And I think that's what was happening in like a very subconscious way. I was going in to do this work as a way to get my need to feel worthy, to feel validated, to feel loved. I was trained from a young age to give, and then I would receive. So I think part of my work has been really learning how to receive and not be so governed by guilt when I do.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, yes, absolutely. And there's just so much in that you just said. And I'm curious, like, if you feel comfortable sharing, but like in friendships, relationships, whatever, like, how does that manifest? Is it just like overly focused on the other person's feelings or feeling like anxious if they seem off? Like, just curious how that kind of showed up for you because I'm thinking of the person listening, like how they might be like, oh, I wonder if I'm doing that. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's just so relatable with your upbringing too.
I think it's prioritizing their experience over mine. So if I have, like let's say for example in dating, if there's things that I'm starting to see in the other person that I'm like, oh, this might not work for me, I will become preoccupied with not wanting to hurt them. So I will just stay in the connection even though it's not feeling really aligned to me. um, because I think part of it too is that I'm very compassionate. I have high empathy, so it hurts me to hurt people. So I want to make sure people feel good, and if I'm out in a group of people, I always like I'm just the person who's very conscientious of the energy of the group, making sure everyone's happy. Um, so it shows up in like almost like a people pleasing kind of way. But then what happens is I get burnt out, I get angry, I get resentful, and then that's when I start to just set these really strong boundaries. And for people, it's kind of like, whoa, like where is this coming from? Because so I'm learning how to like set boundaries as I go, how to advocate for myself and my needs. Yeah, so bumping up against guilt, which is what we'll talk about after. But yeah, guilt has been a big part of my journey, which I'm reconciling as we speak. Yeah,
Absolutely, right
yeah,
there with you. Yeah,
yeah,
and I was just thinking too, like what you were saying about the self-abandoning piece, and it's why I like using that language so much. It's like, well, we're abandoning ourselves because we want to make the other person comfortable, or we can sense if something's off with them. It's like it's yeah, it's so interesting. We're abandoning ourselves because we're afraid of being abandoned, but like you said, the remedy is to is to have our own back. It's just it's kind of wild
yeah,
the way that it actually works when you make these connections like, oh, I'm doing whatever I can to create that safety, but I've just been abandoning myself when I really don't want anyone to abandon me. And it's just it's
yeah.
been such a journey for me. Um, so to just share like a little bit of my experience, like
Hmm.
I would say it my family dynamic growing up was I didn't feel like I had to like care for my parents or anything like that necessarily, but I think I've shared with you before that I just felt like the difficult child in my family where I just felt like I caused problems. I was like so sensitive, so emotional, like just a lot. And then my brother was like the easier one. And I felt like I was like very much just like all out, like no filter with my family. And so then but I found in that behavior, me just being myself, caused a lot of fights, caused my parents to be mad at me. It was frustrating for them to deal with sometimes because I was just so emotional. And so I learned this is bad. I cannot show this side of me in the rest of the world, or else no one is going to like me. And so I felt so much shame for who I was, for my intensity, my passion, my emotional, sensitive nature is like,
Mm.
that's bad. It causes problems. So I will hide that. And with other people, with friends at school, I'm only going to be what people want me to be, which is like nice and quiet. And I always go along with what everyone else wanted. And it worked for me because people, I was just easy to, I was willing to please. I just didn't have an
Yeah.
opinion about things. But at the same time, I felt extremely insecure. I felt like people just bulldozed me and didn't really respect me, because I wasn't respecting myself. Upon
Mhm.
reflection, that's what it was. So it was really interesting. It was like I really separated this other side of myself and I only leaned on the traits that I knew would get people to like me and accept me. But it just perpetuated the shame and the insecurity that I felt inside. And, then that throughout my life turned into being in relationships that were codependent and unhealthy, being
Yeah.
with partners that didn't treat me well because I didn't think highly of myself. And I remember like something that would happen with a college boyfriend was he was like so emotionally toxic. I won't get into the details, but it was just not good. And he- I would be so uncomfortable with us being in a fight or having a disagreement that I would always be the one to apologize first. I would go like buy food. Like I was like fawning. I was just like, I need to make
Yeah.
this go away. And so it was just so much of that because I could not handle the discomfort of somebody, you know, thinking badly of me or being mad at me, because I was just so afraid of being abandoned and being seen for who I truly was. And so for me, what's really caused me then to go from being available, self-abandoning all the time to actually being mindful about who gets access to me. It's same as you with like burnout. It started when I was working in the corporate world and I was just like going, going, going and always like putting everyone else first. It was exhausting to me. And I found that it's like has happened in layers throughout my life as I've gotten older, like I feel like, oh, okay, I've, figured it out, but then there'll be something else that happens that shows me, ooh, I still need to have more solid boundaries here. So lately I will find this coming up a lot in my work where I'll have people reaching out to me or just like on social media, things like that. And I will recognize times where just because I'm so sensitive, I feel people coming at me. I feel the comments, I feel the messages, I
Yeah.
feel the energy. And I like had this meditation just a few weeks ago and I recognized like I need to create more of a filter. And so that realization came to me through sitting in silence and connecting with myself and realizing, ooh, some of this heaviness and anxiety that I'm feeling is because I'm still allowing people to have too much access to me and
Yeah.
it's dragging me down, and that's on me to change. And so I found that it's kind of come in layers for me as well. But like that root cause has always been like, I don't want people to see the real me. I don't want, so I would abandon myself in order to
Mm.
like create that safety
Yeah.
inside.
Hmm. Again, yeah, thanks for sharing all that. There's so much there's so much richness in your experience that I'm so curious now. Like when it comes to like integrating like this, we can call it like this part that felt like she was like not acceptable, right? She was too much. And then you have kind of your higher self, right? That like knew that you were like worthy, lovable just as you are. Like how did you integrate that part back into yourself? Because it seems like you've it really integrated it. You're a mentor for HSPs. You teach this stuff. What was like a
Mhm.
big piece of integrating that shadow part?
Yeah, a big piece was like recognizing how those parts of me that I denied and repressed and felt ashamed of, like recognizing how those parts of me have been responsible for so many good things in my life. And they're actually like the reason that I have done things that I'm happy about. So basically what I mean is like when I think about the parts that I really repressed the most, it was like my intensity, my passion, my big emotions was like that. I used to think that was really bad, but that's the reason that I am, love to write. And I look at every situation with so much depth and there's so much richness in it. And it's the reason like I've been so driven in my career and want have been so passionate to help other people. Like if I didn't have that, then I wouldn't be who I am. And so I started to recognize like, okay, there's parts of this that are actually like they create me as the whole.
Yeah.
And it was also just like diving into the idea of shadow work and learning about shame that I realized like if I ever want to feel more peaceful in my life, I have to like learn how to integrate these parts of me. And so
Yeah.
that was a big thing though, is just recognizing the ways that it's actually served me um has been huge. And like
Mhm.
yeah, recognizing too that, and I like a powerful practice is like thinking about the things that annoy you in other people or that you admire, or you're jealous of, like seeing that I had those things in myself as well, was just like a great practice for accepting it as part of me and seeing like, ooh, okay, learning to see the power in it.
Mm. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing. You said something that really stood out to me, and it was like seeing how the part served you.
Mm.
And I think that's really important whenever we're doing integration work and we're trying to integrate a shadow. I think it's really important, and I'll put my coach hat on now. I think it's really important to like not meet that part of ourselves with shame or fear. I think we need to meet that part with like compassion and looking at it through the lens of thank you. Like you served me for so long, right? Like I think about it if I was a child and I didn't self-abandon, right? With my mother and like let's say I chose authenticity over attachment as a child, my attachment needs would go unmet and I probably would be a lot more fucked up, right? So this self-abandoning part really served me and I think I have like a bit of a four-step process that I think I could like just share with people of how you can connect to this part and start to understand how it is serving you and like how you can have compassion for this part. So like really I just call it like connecting with blank part. Fill in whatever part you want. It's kind of like an IFS thing. I kind of put my own spin on it. IFS meaning internal family systems work for those of you who aren't familiar. And you're just going to go through four questions. Okay. So we'll talk about it from a self-abandonment part. The first question is what feeling, and maybe what I'll do is I'll get you to answer
Yeah,
if you're comfortable with
let's
that.
do it. Yeah.
Okay. So what feeling? So you're going to ask your self-abandoning part this question. Okay. What feeling are you protecting me from?
Mm. Um, Embarrassment.
Embarrassment. Okay. And then you want to move on to what is the emotional need you are fulfilling? So what are you getting from it?
Oh, from the self-abandoning.
Yeah.
Validation from other people.
Yeah. Right. And then you kind of start to explore like how important is validation for us as human beings? Like
Mm-hmm.
this part
Mm-hmm.
is super adaptive until you say it's no longer adaptive, right?
Yeah.
Because it's serving us in some way. So when we understand that it's serving, we can start to develop a new relationship with this part, which can be the foundation for integration, right?
Yeah. Yep.
The third question is what are you afraid would happen if you stopped self-abandoning?
That somebody would see the real me, people would see the real me and decide they didn't like me
Mm,
or think I wasn't good enough.
yeah. 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 Abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't self-abandon, you'll be abandoned. It's like this kind of like I don't even know what that would be called, a catch-22 or something.
Yeah, I
It's
feel like,
like
yeah.
it's yeah. Okay. And then the fourth question is how can I nourish you? So how can you nourish the self-abandoning part?
Having compassion and just like, yeah, compassion and softness for that part of me that wants to be loved and accepted. It's
Yeah.
like I view it as like holding. the hand of that part of me. You know what I mean? Where it's
Yeah.
like showing her I'm gonna be good no matter what.
Yeah.
Like I've got you.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of said it earlier too, a piece like compassion is very important. I think it's the most important. Secondly, you got still. You
Mm-hmm.
got still and you met this part and you're like, ah, I'm leaking energy. I'm giving too much access of myself to somebody else, right? How can
Yes.
I come back and start filtering and preserving, right? It's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. Right before getting on this call, I laid down for 45 minutes because I was feeling overstimulated. I'm picking up on like crazy energy in the universe right now. I'm having like bad anxiety today,
Oh.
and it's like not mine. It's just coming from like universal grid. And so I'm like, I'm going to lay down. I'm going to command that my empathic system stand down. I don't want to empath for the universe right now. I'm just going to be with myself. 45 minutes, come out, and I'm like, I'm feeling nourished. Right. So I nourished that part in me that like would want to go into maybe self-abandonment or not be with myself. I was able to kind of nourish that part. So it's so important, right? Compassion and stillness, like they can go such a long way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's like through those actions that we show ourselves that we like can rely on ourselves. You know what I mean? It's like there's a difference between recognizing it and then being like, well, I don't have time for this, and recognizing it and carving out 45 minutes for you. It's like that is so healing for that part of you that is scared. That is just a beautiful practice. So
Yeah.
that then I think leads well into the last question, which is what has been most helpful for you when it comes to dissolving the guilt around prioritizing yourself? Because that's huge. It's like taking time for yourself, maybe having to rearrange your schedule, whatever that looks like. Like people feel so guilty and overcome by
Mhm.
that, not wanting to disappoint others. So what does that look like for you?
This one I don't have like an answer that it's like, oh, just go this secret way,
Yeah.
or this is a hack that you can do to get around it. It's like, no, like so when I went on my first leave, I've had 3 periods of burnout in my career. The last one, I'm just coming out the tail end of it, and it was a really nasty, bad one. And I think I finally learned the lesson now. But part of that was I took 6 weeks off leave, mental health leave. I was not able to function anymore. And coming back from the leave, I had to email all my clients and tell them that I had all these new boundaries. I had to drop my sessions from 55 minutes to 50. I could only see everybody bi-weekly now because I had to cut my caseload down by 30%. And oh God, I was washed over with I'm letting everyone down. I'm a disappointment. I'm inadequate. I'm shameful. So much guilt. Like it was a really rough few weeks of just being in this like mess of like internal chaos. And it felt like the same emotions that I would feel when I wasn't able to like emotionally regulate my mom or be there for her, these sorts of things. I felt like I was a letdown or I was a failure. And so that's truly the way through it is like through it. You got to feel the guilt and you got to be able to like rise through it and tolerate it and work with the nervous system. But like some of the tangible things was like rest, like just rest. And I got to a point where I couldn't even care anymore. I was too tired. So that helped, right?
Mm-hmm.
It sedated me. Um, Understanding my own codependent behaviors really helped me see that this wasn't about everyone being disappointed in me. This is about me being disappointed in me. And I was attracting people who were pulling on me because the universe was showing me the all my fracture points, where I needed to heal, where I needed to learn and grow. And as I started doing this work, people aren't pulling on me as much. As I'm learning to receive, people aren't taking, people are now showing up to give to me, right? So I just think we're constantly attracting what we need to grow and heal. People are showing up and mirroring to us. That's really what this is all about. So for me, it was like just getting still, recognizing my patterning, and then being able to make new choices and be with the discomfort that comes with making those choices. And EMDR has been helpful for some of the belief reprogramming part of it, like helping me like realize that I am worthy of love. If I'm not, even if I'm not hustling and doing for everybody, I'm still worthy of love, right? So yeah, it's been a couple other things for me. What about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely resonate with that. And I just was thinking about, your point on how you've noticed people mirror different things back to you once you've made that shift. And I think that's so powerful. It's like when we have that level of like respect for ourselves and like ruthlessly prioritize ourselves, I feel like that energy is felt by others. And the people who are triggered or offended by it, that, that's meant to be their experience.
Yeah.
And I like for me, that's been really healing as well to know like somebody can have that reaction and that's theirs to carry, even though it might be uncomfortable for me. It's not mine to, it's not a sign that I need to shape shift now to make them happy. It's like somebody else has to have that experience. And so I think, and it attracts the people who respect you too, because it's
Yeah.
like, it's you're raising your level, your standards. And so yeah, for me it's been the same where it's like the only way out is through and like
Mm.
sometimes, still I'm going to experience guilt, of course, but it's like being with that feeling and
Mm.
knowing like, okay, I'm feeling this way because I can sense the other person feels bad or they don't like what I've said or, XYZ, but they are allowed to have their experience and I'm allowed to still stay firm in this and I can,
Mhm.
breathe through that guilt, breathe through the discomfort. And on the other side of it, I always survive. I'm always
Yeah.
very proud of myself that I stood firm. And the other, I guess, like a practice that I've just been leaning into more and more is simply this just meditating on like the highest self version of me, the most, authentic version of me. How would she, like, how does she move through her life? It sounds like cheesy, but it is something that really like reminds me of like how I want to navigate things. And so when I think about like that version of me, it's like, oh yeah, she's not getting caught up in these little details. She's not like shape shifting herself just because
Mm.
other people want her to do something. And so that's like my North Star because, I think that's ultimately how I want to move through the world is with confidence, with authenticity, with peace, with not being glued to my phone, being present with my family. So I think about like my values and who I want to be, and I can easily then recognize anything that's out of alignment. And so it's like knowing where you're going and who you want to be is a helpful guide as well. Again, because you're kind of like, you can see what doesn't match that.
Yeah.
And I think it's also just so important, like, and that's why I think it's great we're open about this. Like, it's important for people to recognize, like, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. Like, it's not going to feel like amazing, or when you start
Yeah.
prioritizing yourself or saying no to people, it's going to be uncomfortable. But that's part of your growth. That's part of
Yeah.
you becoming, more empowered in who you are. The whole point of everything we talk about. So,
Yeah.
yeah, been my
Yeah. It
journey.
sounds like your journey really has been to come back to a place of trusting yourself and like
Yes.
you kind of checking in with your higher self is maybe like this like self-abandoning part, like looking up to like this like mother energy within you that's like, hey, what do I do? How can I be this higher self? And like that's the part of the integration again, like bring that self-abandoning part in and like train it and teach it how to trust itself. And I know from years of self-abandonment, my level of self-trust is fairly low. Even
Mhm.
still, like I like
Mhm.
check things over a bazillion times. I'm always thinking I'm making mistakes. Like there's a part in me that if I'm leading from that part, I can feel like I don't have a lot of trust in myself and I'm very self-doubting. But then I can also be in like what I call like my father energy, my higher self. That's where I counsel and coach from. That can be very, very discerning and trusting within myself. So it's like part of it is the reparenting process and bringing that part under your wing again and being like, hey, I'll hold you until you learn how to trust yourself again. Um, yeah, it's interesting. We've done a whole episode, I think, on self-trust, haven't we?
Yeah, I think we have. I'm sure.
Yeah, so go
It
back and listen to
sounds
that, people, if you're wanting to know a bit more about self-trust. We've done some talks on that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll just like say like one final thought, I guess, before we wrap up. It just like what I'm hearing both of us say too is just the importance of like having that time with yourself to connect to yourself, to know what your needs even are, to know how you feel, to
Hmm.
reparent yourself, to have the, check in. And I think that's where a lot of people, that's a missed step because I'm too busy, I've got too much going on, too many people need me. And like I would just invite you to see that as like such a radical act of of
Yeah.
self-love is to
Yeah.
like carve out 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever you can do to just like check in with you and be with yourself because just it's like actions speak louder than words. So it's like if you're creating that intentional space for yourself, you're going to get to know yourself when you if you've always been somebody who's externally focused and
Yeah.
doing things based on other people's reactions. Like what a radical act to connect with yourself. You're because you're not we're not going to know how to do any of this if we don't even know how we feel or
Yeah.
what's within us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And I think another thing that really stands out for me is that I'm learning is not everybody deserves the same level of access to me.
Yes.
Right. So it's like I've kind of always thought that I'm like, oh, some dude messaging me on Instagram or Facebook, like, and I have this anxiety of urgency of I gotta message respond to everybody, and I've had to like heal that because I'm like, I don't know this person. They haven't earned, like time in my sphere to be able to, right? So I've had to discern that like there's certain connections that I need to prioritize in my life because I've only got so much bandwidth. And I've also learned too that it's a good indicator of how where you stand in somebody's sphere if they're not allocating time to you, time and energy. And I'm not talking like that they're responsive every minute of every day, but if
Mhm.
somebody's, like not responding to messages or they're taking a week to respond or these sorts of things, you'll know where you stand in that person's sphere. And so it's kind of it can go both ways, right? Like gauging, like, is somebody willing to prioritize me in their life? And am I willing to prioritize people? Who am I prioritizing in my life as well? Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
That's a good thing for people to take away from this as well. It's like,
Yeah.
who are you allowing to have access to you and
Mhm.
be discerning about around that rather than just having it be free flowing. Because
Yeah.
you're sensitive, you can't live that way. Just
Yeah.
it's just not gonna work.
Yeah. Exactly.
Awesome.
Maybe we can wrap up with like just an offering each. Like, what can you offer the community, my community, your community, that might help them with this? What's on your docket right now of things, resources, opportunities that might help somebody move through healing this?
Hmm. So, what comes to mind actually, because I'm just wrapping up a program that would be good for this, but it's not going to be open at the time of this coming out. But what
Yeah.
came to mind actually was just my free cord cutting meditation. I can just like have it linked in the show notes here and on the
Yeah.
podcast, whatever. Because that's a beautiful way to just like disconnect yourself from everyone else's energy throughout the day and just like come home to yourself. And it's a free meditation. So, that is just something that I love and it's been a really, really helpful practice in my life. How about you?
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I would say for me, my authentic relating and empowerment groups. I have another one starting for highly sensitive people, because I'm only running two per year now because I have my gay men courses going. So like two of those and then two HSPs. So November 27th, my next
Okay.
cohort starts. So you can check it out on my website. And yeah, we learn all the skills necessary to make this transformation, and we do it with a group of other highly sensitive people, which is important. So
Yeah, and I can personally attest that it's great because I went through it a
you
couple
did.
years ago and I absolutely loved it and got so much out of it. So definitely check that out.
Yeah. And I'll just say lastly, I'll link the 4 questions, that little mini process that I took you through. I'll link it into the show notes as well too. So
So good. Thanks, Matt.
yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for tuning in. We appreciate you. We're so happy to be back with
yeah,
Sensitive and Empowered, and we will chat with you probably next month.
yeah.
So,
See you in a month.
sending. All right.
See you, everybody.
Bye bye.